What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting. So last week we were at Transform and I was with Metaview on the expo hall, and we actually had an in-person, at the expo hall podcasting studio set up. So as people were walking by, I was basically luring them in and saying hey, come chat with me. We talked to some epic people, and we're going to give you the highlight of those conversations in today's episode. So if you weren't at Transform, or even if you were, here's a little bit of a highlight to catch you up on all the things that we learned. I hope you enjoy it. This is the 10X Recruiting Podcast. Let's get after it. Here's my conversation with good buddy Emerson Croxton, Director of Recruiting at Affirm. What's up, everybody? We're back at Transform with Emerson from Affirm. Emerson, what's the biggest learning so far from Transform?
Biggest learning is that AI is happening whether you like it or not. So Get on board or get left behind. My general perception is AI will not solve any problems. It will enhance whatever is happening.
Exactly.
Right? So if the muscle is atrophied, it will enhance an atrophied muscle. If the muscle is strong, it will enhance the strong muscle. So you have to do the work to define the things appropriately and reasonable enough to have some change over time.
Yep.
You have to do the work in terms of understanding the direction you want to point the AI, right? Or AI in general, right? Because again, AI itself isn't the solution.
Yeah.
It will just enhance, it will shine a light on, magnify what is already there or where it's pointed. And so if you don't have the muscle memory, you won't point it in the right direction.
Yep.
And you'll get back inferior results.
Yep. One of the things you and I were talking about a couple of months ago, we both live in Salt Lake, so shout out to Utah. One of the things we were talking about was you have this runner-up process that I thought was really interesting. Can you tell the audience about that process and what that is?
Yeah. So we have a silver medalist process. We do quite a bit of hiring at Affirm and have some recs that are, a senior software engineer, where we're typically always going to be hiring for that role. We run recs on a rec by rec basis, not pipelined or evergreen. And so getting candidates to the end of that process and selecting one candidate and then rejecting a bunch of people that could have otherwise worked out in another process is a pretty bad idea to me, and low-hanging fruit in terms of ability to jumpstart individual recs pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so we will have multiple folks make it to the end of the process. There will ultimately be a selection of one person to fill that role. We will then identify if there are any other silver medalists in that pipeline, and then have a reroute process to shift those candidates to an already opened rec, or pull a rec forward if we have a really great candidate, or otherwise try and keep them warm, because qualifying them is a lot of the legwork, right? And recruiting is a momentum game. If the momentum is already done, let's try and take advantage.
There's a term in executive search called exhaust.
Yeah.
And the idea in executive search, when you're working with an agency, specifically if they focus on one role, so we call it hiring CTOs.
Yep.
They have 5 different clients, 5 different searches going on at the same time. If I talk to, candidate one might be a fit for client A or client B.
Yep.
Right. And similarly, what you're saying is more from the internal purpose. It takes forever to find these great people. And then you get to the end of the process and it's look, we have this person. This person's N of 1. We got to hire them. But this person's amazing too. And we want to hire you at some other point in time. Just walk me through actually tactile, is it going into a spreadsheet? Are you marking this in the ATS? Where does this live? How are recruiters expected to keep these people warm? What's their incentive to do it? Because recruiters are busy.
A couple things to unpack. So first is the process and the tactical steps, which I would say is not perfect. I think it's still
Totally
a work in progress. What has worked for us is a Slack channel where a recruiter closes a rec, and if they reject those rec or all of those people, then they probably get a message from their manager. And so they're incentivized to reach out to that. We have a specific Slack channel with all the all tech recruiters, for example, and they'll advocate for those people for other recs.
Yeah.
I think a piece of this is also aligning culturally with the recruiting team that the incentive is to fill recs. And when one wins, we all win. right? And having that sense of team and ownership, I think helps to align those incentives, whereas it's not just a recruiter looking to fill their own recs.
Here's my conversation with Daniel Chait, CEO of Greenhouse.
One of the other ways that we're using AI and machine learning is actually to promote fairness and inclusivity. A lot of people think like, oh, there's a lot of risk in AI in magnifying biases and harming, and those are important things to worry about. I think what's also an interesting opportunity, though, is using it to power inclusivity and fairer hiring. One great example of that is we're using natural language models to anonymize resumes.
Are we taking the name off of the resume?
Yeah, so resume parsing is a notoriously difficult problem.
Yeah.
The best commercial resume parsers out there are about 85% accurate, which is not bad, but it's not good enough if you're going to try to anonymize the resumes. So we've developed a resume parser that is significantly more accurate to the point where we can take a resume and it's about 96% and getting better accurate at identifying all the key information on the resume. So what does that mean? Is if I know your name and I've seen like some other things like sports teams you've been on, we can blank those out.
Wow.
And so then I can show you as a hiring manager anonymized resumes and let you just evaluate the fit for the job based on the skills that you see and the track record that you see. And you're not biased by the person's name, and you maybe make assumptions about their gender, their demographics. And so that's like one small way which these technologies can actually be used to improve and promote inclusivity.
Yeah.
I think if you're only focused on the downsides and the risks, you sometimes don't see those opportunities.
Totally. This reminds me of, I think it was like the New York Symphony that did this with blind auditions first.
You got it. That's the famous example.
Yeah. And this is like such a great opportunity, I think, for recruiting to be like at the very beginning of this process. And if you can eliminate it there, then it becomes much easier like down the line to make sure that the funnel is more representative.
You got it.
I think there's a misnomer on the candidate side right now around how the applicant tracking system works.
Yes.
So typically what I hear from candidates is like, well, I apply and I expect the AI, the AI is rejecting me.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
The ATS is rejecting me is what they actually say.
Well,
the ATS is rejecting me. Those damn ATSs.
Yeah. I'm hearing it's like, these robots are like, ruining my chances at getting the job.
You got it.
And I have found historically that ATSs are actually just like stack ranking candidates based off of chronological order of who applied when. I think the future is going to look like, especially for roles that either are high volume or for brands that have lots of volume candidates, that there's going to be this like, we apply, some sort of like AI interaction, and then like a stack ranking situation. Do you think we're going to move towards that world?
So let's dispel a rumor first and let's talk about
Fair enough. Yeah.
I can only speak on behalf of Greenhouse. I don't know what other products do, but exactly as you said, when you apply to a job to a company that uses a Greenhouse, the employer sees them in the order that they applied. It's like going to the deli.
It's chronological.
And you go to the deli, you take a number.
Yep.
And what the candidates don't know, because nobody tells them, I don't blame them, is they just got to the deli and they're number 2000. And so they're like, no one got back to me. It must be the ATS deleted me. I'm like, no, you're still in line.
Yeah.
You're just not ever going to get looked at because they're not going to look at 2000, resumes. So that's what's happening today.
Correct.
And just to be clear, it's a problem. I'm not saying that's like a great answer. That's just the status quo. The first answer to help alleviate that problem is giving our customers better ways to slice through that list more intentionally and get to the ones that they care about, not just the ones that came in order. So helping them giving them more powerful tools to filter that list from where they started. And again, it's not AI, it's not an opaque like magic, it's just better filtering tools. Number two is, to your point, I do think that there will be increasing demand given just the state we're talking about where there's so much flow for some kind of more automated way, as I say, to help the candidates create more signal. And so is that an automated chatbot, an AI experience? Is it something else? Like, I don't know, but I think there's a need to be able to do that. So that way you can find more of the standout candidates to focus on.
It feels like there's so much utility there because it feels like the problem is true on both sides. Candidates are like, I'm going into the black box.
Yeah.
And then companies are like, this black box is so big, I don't even want to open it because there's low ROI.
And so the third thing exactly is like giving the candidates better tools. And I think
interesting.
I think there's a really interesting opportunity there where like today, if you walk around this conference, everyone's got tools that they sell to the buyer, rightly so.
Yeah.
Focus on what the buyers need, and the buyers have all the problems that they have and opportunities that they have. But the job seekers, they're not buying a greenhouse instance. They're not purchasing any of the other cool technology around here. So people don't always think about their needs. But I think there's an opportunity to solve some of the problems that employers have in the ways we're talking about by helping the candidates, helping the job seekers. And I think if we can give the job seekers a better way to create more signal, the employer can know more about them and do a better job at building their funnel.
What does it look like? Like, give me the click in.
I don't have the full answer yet.
Okay.
But as I said, I think it's got to be involved in helping that job seeker just create more signal, because they're, let's face it, highly motivated. They want the job.
They really are.
And so I think they'll do stuff. And what exactly they'll do and how that works to create signal. Right now, again, I don't begrudge a job seeker. If you're a job seeker out there and you're trying to get the best chances, like, yeah, you're going to go buy one of these tools and it's going to blast out your resume to 1,000. I mean, it's just a numbers game. Like, okay, but it's getting less and less effective.
It's highly ineffective.
Everyone else is doing it. And so you're no longer, if you send out 200 jobs, you're no longer
Doesn't work.
applications, you're no longer standing out because everyone else is sending out 200 and soon it's going to be 2,000 or 2 million. And so there's no winning that AI arms race.
Yep.
It just ends in there's zero signal in the job application, and now what?
Yeah.
And so I think the way out has to be the job seekers providing more signal.
Yep.
And then the other thing is let's generate more signal about the employers. And so we announced Greenhouse Verified. Greenhouse Verified is at its most basic. Employers, hiring managers, and recruiters spend their day in Greenhouse.
Yep.
All the work that they do to take in candidates, move them along the process, disposition them, communicate with them, that all happens in our tool. What that means is we have a huge amount of data about what they actually do.
Yeah.
Like, do they actually get back to all the candidates, or do they only get back to the one they want to move ahead with? And the rest of them are left in limbo. If you look at candidate surveys for the last 20 years, the number one complaint that candidates have is I never heard back.
Ghosting.
Well, guess what? We know who ghosts candidates and who doesn't. It's right there in the Greenhouse data. They pushed the button or they didn't.
Okay.
So if you're one of the good ones and you get back to every applicant, whether they're moving forward or not, you now get a badge in Greenhouse. This is Greenhouse Verified. You are communicative. And there's a handful of things that we can do like that. We know if you're actually filling in scorecards or not.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I know if you're like being fair and objective in your assessment of applicants. I know if you're moving quickly, like a lot of things. Those things matter to job seekers.
Yeah, they do.
So the other part of it is that we're now surfacing really useful information about the behavior of the employer that helps the employer stand out, that makes the good employers look really good. That also is really useful signal for the job seekers to say, well, rather than spamming the next 2,000 jobs, I'm going to go find those ones where I know the employer is going to give me a fair chance.
Yeah.
I know they're going to treat me well, and I want to work there instead. So I think there are new paradigms that don't involve just like blasting everyone with more AI, that are both more human and a lot more effective and more sustainable.
Well, it feels like we're in a paradigm shift right now.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I need to talk to you like every 6 months to kind of get the update because things are changing very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, 6 months, maybe 6 years in this environment. It's wild.
Now we have one of my homies, Melanie Naranjo, Chief People Officer at Athena. All right, Mel, what's the biggest learning so far from Transform?
Oh man, it's been really interesting talking to people. I think that a lot of people are struggling right now. And in particular, I think people are really struggling to sort of get that seat at the table and come to the table with solutions. I'm really seeing a lot of problems, a lot of this isn't working. Why isn't my CEO partnering with me? They don't care about people. And I super empathize. It's really hard out there and people don't take HR seriously. But I think people really are struggling to sort of take the reins, take a bit more agency, and really just come to the table with a more proactive and solution-oriented attitude.
I agree it's hard out there, but this isn't that new terrain. We've been here now for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Right. But it does, I agree with you. It kind of feels like the conversation hasn't really progressed.
Yeah.
Why?
What's interesting is you see on LinkedIn, a lot of people are talking about this and there's a lot of validation for it, right? Like my CEO sucks or why do employees always do this? And you see like the likes and the reactions and you're right and my CEO does. And I think that we're inadvertently sending these signals.
I agree.
Right? That like that is the thing to focus on and they're the problem, not us. We're right, they're wrong. And if they could only understand HR better, then everything would be better. And I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think that HR is always right. We were talking about this recently, the term influencing without authority. I actually just stinking hate that term. I hate it. I actually think it's code for I think I know better than everyone else on the business team. And so what I need to do is sneakily manipulate people to just do what I want them to do. And the reality is sometimes HR people have really dumb ideas. I'm one of them. And when that happens, if you really are in your own silo and you're like, I'm convinced I'm correct and I don't need to know anything about the business, you are never, ever, ever going to make progress.
So how do we move beyond where we currently are today? Because I would have expected, given everything going on with the macro environment, with how I think HR has like been cut from just a headcount standpoint, that it would have already happened. But it seems like there's actually like 2 feet into the ground, digging in, like this is our stance.
Yeah.
My take is like, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so how do we progress like where we are?
I think there are two sides of this. One is I'm talking to all you CEOs out there, okay? I think CEOs need to be better about giving feedback and calling out HR when they're not doing the job right. I think a lot of times when HR messes up or they don't communicate effectively, HR is just dismissed. And you never talk to HR and they're not involved in the future, right? Which I actually think is a miss. Like, I really think that's a missed opportunity. I genuinely believe in the value of people strategy. And I can give an example later, but like, I genuinely believe in this. However, most CEOs just like overlook that. My CEO, for example, Roxanne, like I have multiple times, multiple occasions come to her with an idea and she'll be like, Melanie, you are a very smart person. And I know that this is probably important in some way, but I gotta be honest, I stopped listening like 2 minutes ago because you're not talking about anything I'm interested in. Like, you need to try again. You need to reframe that. And I'm like, huh, okay. And like, but it's right because it helps me to know.
It's honest.
It's honest. And by the way, if she dismissed me, I would never have a chance to prove myself. She really gave me that chance to tell me, here's what sucked about it. Come back, try again, right?
Yeah.
So I can do better. The other side is, I think on the HR side, you got to be real with your CEO. Like, just say, listen, the last 3 proposals that I brought to you shot down in an instant, but you approved the last 3 proposals that the sales leader brought, right? Assume that they had a good reason to do so. And instead of being defensive about it, say, what did they do better than me?
Exactly.
How did I fall short?
Self-reflection.
Self-reflection and acknowledge, be open to the possibility that you were wrong. And there is a reason that it got vetoed.
Here's my chat with Matt Staney, VP of Community at Hire Community. So the next thing is you run a very large recruiting community.
Yeah.
How many people are in that community?
13,000
Okay.
TA leaders across the globe.
Okay. So what else are people talking about right now? Like, what's top of mind for those folks?
Well, especially here in the US, been a lot of talk on DEI
Oh, interesting.
and how to manage some of that right now, given some of the political environment here.
Yeah. What are they saying?
Some people are now kind of switching to belonging, and I think a lot of people are having an adverse reaction to that term being used
Yeah.
in a negative connotation without really spelling it out. It's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, how can you be against any one of those 3 things, right? And why are we, lowering those investments? And I think it starts with the fact that it started with a lot of the, government contracting companies that work with, and they see that trend changing. And I think it's disheartening for a lot of TA leaders who really take it seriously and know the business justification for having more diverse teams in whatever way that is.
Yeah.
We know that it drives profitability. And so I think there's a lot of resentment or even anger and some TA leaders thinking like, wow, this is something I really thought my company believed in. And now.
So they feel rug pulled.
Yeah, they feel rug pulled. And it's almost like they believed in this culture, this employer brand that some of these companies built. And now it's become pretty obvious in a lot of cases that it was just for show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just part of the moment because everyone else was doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Humans.
Yeah. And so the TA leaders feel like they're the ones like holding the bag,
Yeah.
being like, wait, I joined this, I pitched this here. Now we're like completely reversing course.
And you put this on me, like you executive teams put that pressure on me. Like I had to make sure that, 50% of our candidates were sourced this way. I built process. I built strategy. I invested in technology, like Textio and other things to make sure that we're doing this the right way.
And now we're reversing course.
Yeah.
Entirely.
Yes. Which is, it takes a long time. There's a long-term initiatives to try to
Unwind.
and so to unwind it, it's like, geez, what I've just been 6-7 years doing, you know?
That's a different view than the one that I have heard, which
Yeah.
is TA and HR folks are upset about it because they want to bring it into the organization. What you're describing is actually way different than that. No, I've had to do all this work,
Yeah.
which came from up top. I became the face of this.
And I believe in it.
Yeah. But like now we're doing all this other stuff or we're unwinding this thing. And it was just like, who are we? What do we stand for?
Yeah. What is our culture?
Yeah.
Like, do we really care about, I think it's that same thing. It's like, is it people and profits? Like, yes, we all work in a capitalistic society. We have to drive profitability, but do we have to lose our humanity to do it? I think there's a balance that can be had.
Next up, we got Cassie Lehman's VP of Talent at Craft Ventures. So we're middle of March 2025, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world has changed drastically over the last 5 years.
Yep.
You work with early stage founders. What are they saying about this job market, the candidates that are available to them, and how does that differ from what they were saying 5 years ago?
It hasn't changed.
Really?
We only hire the top 1%. We only want the best. And so fortunately, through my experience learning and working with hiring managers that want that, it's really articulating what does that mean to your business. And then once they start saying, oh, the school, this degree, that, and the other, I will be the first to tell them why, right? Like
Totally.
what makes that person more qualified than someone who codes at home for fun on the weekend and didn't go to college?
Exactly.
Right? It's the same conversation that we had years ago. I will continue to pound that into their brains because being able to identify someone on paper doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be great in person or doing the job. You have to talk to them. I tell that to even, some of our investors are like, come up with a calibration list. I'm like, okay, we can calibrate off of just what's on paper, but now with the use of AI, how do you know it's real?
Yeah.
Right? You still have to talk to them. A lot of the competencies that people ask for in, let's say, a finance role, like has to communicate well, yada, yada. How do you know that on paper? You don't.
You have to
You
talk to
have
them.
to talk to them. So it takes a lot of reps. It does take a lot of hours. Identifying on paper is one part of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a good fit for the role.
Yeah. So the thing I'm noticing right now is with company construction. And I think in this last run up, when you ask a company, how are they doing? They'd be like, we're doing great. We have 500 employees. And headcount, in my opinion, has always been a vanity metric. But now we're starting to actually see like founders really lean into, well, we got to X million in ARR with 10 people. And I think actually David Sachs at Craft is probably like one of the people who should be lauded for bringing this to light because of the burn multiple conversation.
Right.
How are founders talking about that to you? And is that loud? It seems like a flex with founders being like, yeah, like we're building to massive amounts of revenue with fewer employees. Are you seeing the same thing?
In a sense, depending on the business, right, and how they've looked at it. But we have noticed it's no longer growth at all costs. That hasn't been the case for the last 2.5 years. That shifted quite a bit in the tech industry. And I would say that with the uptick in AI, like dev tools, right, we invested in several of them that are going to really expand the engineer's output too. I just think my husband's building product. He's a recruiter. And he's never coded a single line of code in his life.
Wow.
And he's using a combination of like Vercel and Cursor and ChatGPT, Claude. And he's building out recruiting tools on his own, just for his own business use case. And like, great, bring it to market. We could probably all utilize this. But the fact that someone with zero coding experience can go out and build products means that engineers should adopt to utilizing co-pilots or some sort of AI tool to 10x their output.
Yep.
And I think that you can say that about any use case of a role inside of a business is with the right tooling, you don't need as many people anymore.
Here's my chat with Annie Wenzel, partner at Swing Search. So the other interesting piece is that at Swing, you guys are doing a lot of hiring for early stage companies.
Yep.
What are you seeing right now in the hiring market?
I'm seeing a huge influx of requests for, I would say, AE buildouts and internal recruiting leaders. And that's, so that means,
Really?
Yeah. Like every day I'm getting, Annie, can you talk about an enterprise AE build out? Anywhere from like 3 to 8 reps. or we want to bring recruiting back in house and we need a talent lead. And I'm also seeing 5 days a week come back, which I actually don't want to say out loud because it's a recruiter's worst nightmare to get people who have moved to Bend, Oregon or Bozeman, Montana and get them to come back. And,
Salt Lake City.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I am starting to see like at least 3, but we've got some earlier stage clients that are just starting with 5 days a week. And those are definitely trends over the last like 2 months. I'm seeing more and more and more of.
Yep.
And marketing's coming back. Executive marketing search is coming back, which was dead for 2 years.
Doesn't that have like the shortest tenure in the C-suite?
I've heard it does, but it's similar for VPs of sales at Series A or B. It's like 18 months. And I've also heard like 1 out of 3 are right. So knock on wood. I haven't had any fall-offs in over 2.5 years. So I'm good. And all my searches are marketing right now. But I think because of that fear, founders are willing to put in a little bit more time up front to really calibrate and figure out, okay, I might not know exactly what I want, but I know what I don't want. And let's start there.
Yeah.
And I love working with early stage companies and, late stage companies as well. Like my biggest client right now is Series E. Yeah. So we do pre-IPO, mostly go to market, but I do a lot of G&A and people search as well. But I also, as long as I can get someone focused on, I know I need them to spike in product marketing, like I can take care of the rest. When I want someone that can message and position, but also do growth and also do demand gen and then PR. That's when I'm like, okay, we got to focus. But that's kind of the fun stuff is teasing that out, being a search scientist.
What are you seeing on the candidate side? So like a little bit of what I'm hearing right now is, hey, it's the devil I don't know. Like right now I'm at this company, I'm happy, things are going well. Like, yeah, this company like might be hot and like, might be the thing of the moment, but like, will that last? And oh, by the way, are there psychopaths that, I'm going to partner with on the C-level team? What are you hearing on the candidate side?
I think that always rings true. And I think as executive recruiters, where you're always back channeling, like they need to do the same. If you're feeling, of course, we always use the analogies like dating. If you're feeling a vibe, it's like, oh, talk to their former direct boss, talk to their former peer and like get that information early on, because obviously going through a cycle is putting a lot of time and investment.
On the candidate side, like I find that people are scared to make the move right now more so than in the past. And the reason why is because there's been a lot of layoffs. And then to your point around 5 days back in the office, I'm seeing the 996 thing too, which is like, what is it? 9 hours a day. I don't even know, like 6 days a week, like you're in the office. People are pushing for that. Obviously founders that have like crazy demands. The market appears to be positioned from an employer friendly side, right? And they control the market. And so I think candidates with agency are scared to make a move. Are you seeing the same thing?
Yes. And I feel like that's always kind of been there. And you're talking to someone who's been at the same firm for over 12 years.
That's wild.
I'm a lifer. It's like, I know a good thing to double, and obviously like every 3 months my job changes. I'm working on different searches and projects and I get to meet a lot of people, but I would say like my best advice for those folks are like the worst thing ever is FOMO and like looking at TechCrunch in 2 years and going, oh my gosh, why didn't I take that call with for sale? Or why didn't I take that call with Snowflake X years ago? And you don't have to go to the end and waste everyone's time, but you can take those first couple steps. And a lot of it is just, asking around, seeing what the word on the street is. Like, do you have a friend that used to work there? Can you get a quick back channel on like the hiring executive and filling that out? Because there's nothing worse than being too comfortable and like not having that growth mindset. But also everyone's so different. There's such a psychology in search. Usually I ask more open-ended questions like, well, why did you take the call or what was appealing? And let's kind of deep dive into that. And if there's enough there where it makes sense, I'm always just take one step and then like don't future trip. And if there's something that's there, like you can decide at that point to kind of move on. But that's also how I close a lot of searches. It's just take that one next step.
Here's my conversation with Natalie Stones, co-founder of Talent Collective.
We had a great conversation over lunch about why hiring a full-time head of talent sometimes just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so that is a very hot take. And I tend to agree if the company is not in a perpetual state of hiring. Are there other use cases that I'm missing to where it doesn't make sense to have a full-time head of talent?
I've seen actually a lot of the fractional clients that my co-founder and I have, they're like a nonprofit or they're a mom and pop company. Like
Totally.
To your point, they're not perpetually hiring or they're just not sophisticated with recruiting, don't know what to do, and don't know that they need to be hiring or having an infrastructure for it. I think if you're in scale up mode or you're an enterprise level company,
Yeah.
yes, it makes sense. But it's really good for the seasonality of companies, or if you're early stage, you're just growing up and running. But the controversial piece of it is one of my 2 or 3 jobs back, I was head of talent at a Series A company. And I came in, I built everything from scratch, hired the team, all the blah, blah, blah. And then after maybe 9 months, was like, okay, this is just like kind of ho-humming along. But meanwhile, I'm sitting here with like a really nice salary and benefits, but I don't really feel like I'm doing much.
Yeah.
And it was kind of out of values alignment for me. And so I opted to take a sabbatical, and then I just never came back because I felt like they don't really need me.
Yeah.
Not everybody would make that choice for themselves, but in that case, I didn't feel like that startup needed a full-time head of talent anymore, but they could have really benefited from having me fractional as needed
Yeah.
when they had seasonalities with their business, things like that.
I feel like one of the areas of dissonance is employees want more fractional opportunities. I especially see it in the talent and HR community. I think these jobs are really hard. They're very repetitive. Oftentimes they not only they don't come with glory, but you kind of tend to be the person who has to take out the trash.
Yeah.
And that sucks after. And so you want like more flexibility, more optionality, that sort of a thing. On the other side, founders and CEOs are like, well, if you're not with me full time, then
Yes.
you're against me. And so how do you think about like where we are today? Like, do you think that there is a market big enough for the amount of people that want to go fractional?
That was a good question. I think there is an oversaturation of people that are going fractional. My other controversial take, and something that I like to say a lot in the community, is fractional really should be reserved for people that have previously been in some sort of leadership position.
Totally
They've
agree.
either were responsible for strategy and or managed a team. Fractional is not an IC level role. It's not, executive level recruiter that's not going to be responsible for any strategy or management, not working directly with the C-suite or HR or things where you're actually like owning TA.
Yep.
If we were to be able to kind of like cut out the fat of people that are trying to be fractional recruiters, which really is just recruiting consultant.
Exactly. Agency. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I think there could be a good market for the amount of like fractional TA leaders to be brought in as needed, especially based on like, the industries you've worked for, the verticals, the size stages of companies. I think there's a lot of different variety within the fractional leaders that it could work.
Okay.
But with the saturation of ICs, man, no one's going to like me after saying this.
Well, I don't know. Here's the thing is like, I think it's important to just tell people what we're seeing. Right. And, my view of the world on some of these like more difficult topics is like, this is just where it is. Now, I think you and I both want a world to where founders and CEOs are like, they should be engaging fractional all the time. They should be getting value out of it. They should be seeing about how flexibility in their workforce can provide value in their business. I just don't think we're fully there yet. And I think a lot of people who are working inside of companies today have this illusion that, oh, well, this person just went fractional. They must be like having the best time of their lives. And in fact,
No.
Right, because you have to spin up your own business. You have to run a sales pipeline. You have to then close that pipeline. Then you have to like have an active engagement and keep that person happy while that person's trying to like get more and more out of you. And then you're like, hold on, I have boundaries here, but you don't want to lose the client. So I think it's really easy to just look on LinkedIn and be like, oh, it seems super glamorous over there. And so the reality is that like, yes, this is an option, but the grass isn't always green. Next up, we have Chloe Glasgow, head of people and talent at Normal Computer.
I think that sourcing is an art form, and I have trouble relinquishing that to an AI.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So then what's your secret? Like, clearly you feel like you're good at it. And so what do you do in sourcing that makes your magic happen?
I feel like this is a paid, I should be paid to give this information.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah, I have a system of like, I call it like recruiting for gas, the give a shit factor.
Oh, interesting.
And I figured out ways to just like scan someone's LinkedIn profile and kind of on like a point system and mentally, like how much gas they'll have and if they'll be an impactful hire. So I feel like when I do reach out to someone, I might only reach out to 20 people for a role in a week, but then I know every single one of those people could probably get the job if they reply and get through the interview process. And then that way you're able to message people in like a more personal way, and even maybe like back channel and see if you know anyone they know and get an intro.
Warm intro.
So yeah, just like figuring out how to source for quality, I think, just makes it less painful. And I feel like there are cues, like maybe like new grad roles and like early talent where sure AI would be super helpful because it's such a numbers game. But when you're going for like more, I think, strategic hires and like complex engineering hires, it's better to have a human
Yeah.
doing the sourcing.
I've never heard anybody say GAS stands for give a shit factor. I love that. What would make somebody have high GAS?
So I think like there are different things like their career progression within a certain company.
Promotion history, stuff like that?
Yeah, even then like backtracking, like how devoted are they to their interests? Being multifaceted, someone that's only been maybe interested in like one thing their whole life and just good at just like was a concert violinist on the side while they're working their full-time job. That shows me this person is very passionate about what they do.
Yeah.
And they're very devoted to be able to like maintain performing at that level
Yep.
while still having a job. And
Yeah.
so there's different components. I do think I could give a whole TED talk on
I want
on
this TED
sourcing,
talk.
but-
Now I have Caitlin Pino, VP of People at Nota Bene. What about hiring? Like hiring in 13 countries sounds crazy. I would say on one point, right, you have like the global talent pool.
Yep.
So like everybody is available to you.
Yeah.
And the other, it's like, how do we know that this person is good and they're going to be autonomous and they're going
Yeah.
to like be able to run in an primarily like async culture? How are you guys assessing for those things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And we've definitely put a lot of work into improving our interview process to be very repetitive and consistent and truly digging into the areas that we view as being most crucial
Yeah.
to being successful as an employee at Nota Bene.
Yep.
So those things have really kind of honed in on excellent written communication, accountability. And the other thing that we really lean into is strong opinions loosely held. So this idea of we're hiring you to be a subject matter expert in whatever field or function that you operate in. And we want you to come in and be able to share that expertise. But if new information comes available, we also want to make sure that you're able to maybe change your point of view. So strong opinions loosely held.
I tell my 6-year-old all the time, the smartest people in the world change their minds with new data.
Absolutely. And so with our global team, with all of the different cultures, we just find it super important to make sure that, we have that strong opinions loosely held and that folks, again, also can approach that with a lens of kindness. Again, regardless of like what your cultural norm may be and how you communicate, we want to have kindness be at the root of that.
Totally. Next up, we have Virginia Tirado, co-founder at Riku. So your background's in recruiting, you did some leadership recruiting at great places, including Amazon. What's changed in the last few years, and how do you think it's going to change even more going into the future?
So I think it keeps changing. First of all, obviously, there's still uncertainty in the economy and the future, what everything means. And many companies are being very cautious. So on the leadership piece, I've had some interesting conversations here as well about how companies are going around hiring for those senior roles and how cautious they may be and how long it might take to actually jump in and get things done. And I think that what I feel as a recruiting leader that I can do for anyone in supporting them in that journey is to try to understand what is holding them back, right? If you need a particular role, and I've had this conversation with a couple of founders already this week, is that why are you reticent? If you are, that means that's probably not the priority you have. Like you might think you need a chief of staff, and actually you may not need a chief of staff. You might need a generalist. You just need somebody to help you focus on other things while you can actually focus on what's important for you. And you keep postponing certain roles and so on. So just guiding them into understanding where the priorities are and why are they trying to recruit. I think what has changed also is that there's faster ways of sourcing and networking and getting to candidates. There's more people out there trying to sort of help and engage in that market. And you have more options as a leader of who to go to. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to go to the big Shrek firms anymore. I think there's a lot of folks like, that have been very successful in what they've done and can become advisors, like some of the stuff you're doing. And I think that that's wonderful. I think also AI, when we talk about everything that we're learning here, will somehow level the playing field and make it easier, maybe lower costs, help you with some sourcing, help you with different things like Metaview, like all these different players that we're seeing here are going to make the world of recruiting much more accessible for people, less intimidating. And I think that that's where we need to come in and figure out how we stay relevant. What do we need to do, and how does our role need to evolve to support our business partners, right? Our business leaders, to make their lives easier and for us to still have fun in doing what we do best.
Totally. I think AI is going to be more like the Iron Man suit.
Yes, the augmentation, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where it's important. So I've also given this advice to other folks. I've been going back to not just HR conferences, but actually connecting more in the business world and understanding what are the business priorities, where is the technology going, and what are people going to be looking for, and who's going to be competing for what, and learning more and more about what is relevant for my stakeholders so that I can actually then figure out the best strategy to help them in the talent space.
This conversation is with Scott Kirsch, VP of Sales and Search at Connery Consulting. So Scott, what is your biggest learning from Transform so far?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nolan. I'd say obviously there's a huge push both across HR and recruiting and AI. That's a lot of the booths, that's what we're seeing. But when you go listen to speakers, they're talking about not getting too overwhelmed or too inundated with AI and, not trying to grow too fast and using all these tools, but really just to augment your team is helpful. But it might be a bubble. There definitely might be an AI bubble. We've seen this a few times. And so I think that's been definitely a lot of chatter.
So are you saying that like right now, the push is basically to create the Iron Man suit versus like there's a little bit of hesitancy to actually deploy like full AI of like AIs without humans. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. And having AI be a part of your product is, almost like a buzzword right now.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people are, is it effective AI? What's it actually doing? Is it giving us an ROI? Is it important to us? And so I think that's really what we're seeing both in recruiting and HR, and there's definitely value in it, but just not getting too caught up with the term AI and what does it mean for your company?
It is like the buzzword that people can't stop saying.
Yeah.
Which honestly, I think everybody's eye rolling about.
Yeah.
Are you guys deploying it at Connery right now?
We use it. We do use it for some of our tools, of course. And, we definitely incorporate some of the tools here, but human interaction is still number one. So that's how we operate. We do a lot of embedded HR and recruitment. So that human interaction, understanding the culture versus AI culture, that's what we're about. So we use it for, maybe top of funnel sourcing and things like that, but nothing too crazy.
In the top of funnel sourcing, is it actually effective?
It can be I would say for volume, if we're going for volume type roles, maybe not too high level, then yeah, it is for sure. But if you have very, those purple squirrels, those niche roles, there's just no way. It's just not as effective. It might give you a few candidates, but it's about understanding that person and really effective outreach that what about their background makes them interested in this role that sometimes AI maybe it's not there yet.
Yeah, that's my take too. Up next is Ed Snook, Director of People Operations and Recruiting at Miston Labs. Ed, what's your biggest learning so far from Transform?
So I was actually surprised at how much AI was dominating. It was a big conversation topic last year, and it seems like it was even more this year. But unfortunately, in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of companies are still just very kind of like scratching the surface of like, yeah, we started playing around with Chat GPT a little bit. Like, yeah, I could have told you that. Like, that's nothing earth shattering, right? So I think it's still way early. I think there are some cool tools out there for specific use cases. I think you might know something about this, Nolan.
We do.
But yeah, when it comes to like, what are you actually doing? I've seen a lot of kind of talking heads being like, we're playing around. And again,
I think there's a really big question from CEOs to chief people officers and heads of talent, which is like, what is your AI strategy? And how can we use AI to create more leverage such that we don't have to hire more people?
Oh, 100%.
That's the question. I don't know if we have great answers outside of very specific use cases, which is kind of going to be my point, which is like, obviously you have like the Metaviews of the world for doing note taking and then ultimately like getting better over time to predict hiring. But like outside of note taking in the recruiting process, there really isn't like, this is the thing that AI is going to come help with. Yet.
Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing. What do you think?
I agree 100%. I think you get this kind of generic, we'll do like something and we'll get like efficiency gains of like 20%. It's like, doing what exactly?
Yeah.
There are a couple use cases that make a ton of sense, you know, like call center, maybe recruiting, right? And some of the other ones, I'm sure they'll come out.
Yeah. My old CEO used to say, well, we can just like sprinkle some AI on it. And that appears to be kind of the case so far.
Yeah. Sure.
What about you guys? How many people are you guys hiring this year? And like, what's your talent strategy looking like?
We're definitely ramping up hiring. I don't know an exact number yet, but hopefully soon. We work in a really dynamic environment. Every environment's dynamic, right? But we tend to only plan in like 6-month cycles, actually.
Oh, interesting.
And so we're coming up on another rev, essentially, to be like, okay, from what are we going to do from now until the end of the year in terms of growth? And I think it's going to be a higher trajectory of growth than we've had in the past like 12 months or so. But a little too early to say what that's going to look like.
I like doing it on a 6-month cadence. Is that intentional?
That is intentional for sure. And it's built around major product launches. And
So kind of like the Airbnb thing?
Tell me more. I don't know.
Airbnb does 2 product launches a year, and they structure the entire company operating rhythm around those 2 product launches.
Yes, essentially that. And we'll do, you know, like, hey, the next 6 months to get this product out the door, we're going to need X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then once we launch it, let's pause. Let's see what the reception is. And then we're going to go back into planning and say like, well, based on the reception in the market, we're going to need like now ABC. So let's go chase after that talent.
That's super interesting. So have you done that before at other companies?
No.
Okay. And then so now you have an opportunity to like live a real life A/B test on doing it this way versus kind of doing it like the once a year. And then, you know, everything by, you know, month 8 is like basically erroneous.
Oh, totally.
Which is better.
So I do like the 6-month cycle because, I mean, most companies, you know, strive for this annual planning, and it's usually like, oh yeah, we're going to get like the headcount roll up and like all the recruiters are going to have their recs, you know, by like 3rd week of January, and that turns into like the 3rd week of April.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you're going to do it that way, then you may as well just do it in 6-month increments anyway.
Totally. That makes a ton of sense. All right, that's a wrap on all of the people that we talked to at Transform. I hope you guys learned as much as we did. Make sure to stay tuned for next week's episode of 10X Recruiting. It just keeps getting better and better. See you guys soon.